My name is Joy Stanford. I am a first-time candidate. I'm a mom. I'm a health educator as well as a substitute teacher in the Peninsula School District. By trade, I am a licensed broker. My background is I spent many years, the last 14 to be exact, working with seniors around Medicare, sales and consulting, and educating seniors on how to use their Medicare and understanding Medicare and choosing the best plan for them. Between 2003 and 2013, I worked for Group Health, which is now Kaiser, and then went on to kind of a different path and did substitute teaching because the commute from Gig Harbor to Seattle just got worse and worse and worse for me, and I needed to have something that was closer to home. I did that for a year before somebody, I said they poached me, and I went back to Medicare as a community liaison down in Thurston County. And then this February decided I think I might want to change yet again and maybe run for office. And so I ended that particular job. I was contracted. I ended it February 15th. And then took some time off to discuss with my family whether or not I was going to really take this serious and, okay, I'm making a run for this office. By March, I had made my decision that I would do it towards the end of March, and April 3rd, I just kind of jumped in. Why do I want to run? I want to make sure that everyone has a voice at the table in the 26th district. I didn't feel like the elected representatives were listening and considering all the stakeholders in the 26th district, and I wanted to change that. I want to make sure that our elected representatives are working collaboratively together with all parties in the legislation, and that's important to me. So if I'm going to say they're not doing it, well, I better step up and do it. So I decided to run.
Interesting. Tell me a little bit more of the story, because it sounds like you went through a lot of thought. You know,
I did. Well, I did.
Was there particular issues you felt? When you say you weren't being representative, are there certain
topics?
I
think education, gun control, those were just some of the top things. And I was standing by watching our youth speak up, stand up and speak up. And I was like, oh my, okay, what are we as adults going to do? And that's when I was like, okay, I have the capacity. I can do this. Time to. And it was a conversation with both my sons that kind of, they were like, what are you doing, Mom? Here's what we're doing. You know,
How old are your sons?
My youngest is 18, just graduated from Peninsula High School, and my middle son is 30. He lives in Illinois.
So. And you're running as a Democrat? Have you been associated with the party for a long time? Is that something?
You know, my husband was way more active than I was. I just had started late last year after an incident at my son's school. Someone tried to burn down a portable at my son's school. And in the midst, I think, of them doing that, they wrote, "Black Lives Don't Matter" on the ground. And that's kind of what, like, I was like, whoa, wait, now they're bringing the hate to my son's school, and as a substitute teacher and someone who cherishes all these kids, and I call all these kids my kids, I was like, I didn't agree with that. So I joined something called Open Hearts. I joined, that's a community group that has a positive, we try to bring positive events to our community in Gig Harbor. I joined the Parent District Council at the school district, and I also joined the Equity and Diversity Council at the district level. And I didn't even know these existed until someone was like, do you want to get involved? Here's what it is. And so I was like, all right, I'm all in. And through that, the principal came to me and said, Joy, I think we're going to start a diversity committee at Peninsula High School. You know, would you like to be a part of it? And I was like, yes, I will be a part of it. But the kids run it. So I'm just a parent representative that is in the room, but they run the whole deal. So So that's been my involvement. I've always been a parent who's involved with the school since my older son was in South Kitsap School District. So I'm always like, that parent's like, what do we need? What are we doing? What event? You know, but not at the level of politics or, you know, getting involved at the district level. So
one son through South Kitsap, then one son through
Peninsula School District,
okay.
Yes.
Well, from that education first, I mean, it sounds like that's your big issue, the schools, the education, that kind of stuff. Give me your opinion, one, of, you know, what's the parents' perspective of how the legislature has been doing. I assume you've been kind of following the trying to put more money into schools.
Correct.
Do some things like that. And then another kind of just more specific is what the legislature did last year with the property tax levy swap to pay for things differently. Do you think that was the right approach?
Because the whole tax and the swap, I'm still reading up on that, trying to find, I don't think there's one solution, but I think they were trying to come up with something. So I'm not sure that I can say I agree or disagree with that. But I will say that putting more funding towards education, as a parent, I am all for that. But I also don't want to burden working families and taxpayers with more taxes. But if that's the only way we can do it, can we do it in a way that doesn't out-tax someone from their home? I had someone say this at the doors with me. I don't want to be taxed out of my home. That's important to me to hear that and then go, you're right, I don't want you to be taxed out of your home. How can we look at that and say we don't want to do that for someone, especially my seniors who are on fixed incomes. And I know there's a certain amount of money if there's a little waiver where you can opt out because you don't make as much. And so I've tried to make sure that people know that, you know, go back to the county, go back to your city and say, you know, I don't make this much, can I get this waiver to opt out of this? So at least I know there's some things like that, but I'll speak to the bond in Gig Harbor. We ran this bond. Parents were on the group that put it together. And as a parent looking at it, I felt like this was the way to go. And I felt good about it. And I supported it. And I phone banked for it. And I waved signs for it. But now at the doors, I'm hearing people say, that was great, I wish it passed. But then I'm also hearing older people say, who are retired, say, but my taxes were gonna go up. I just got my tax bill and then I retired from my job 2 weeks later. I had one lady tell me that. Literally, I stood there and spoke to her for 20 minutes because she was so incensed. I got my tax bill and then what happened was this levy was gonna come. And if it had passed, here's how much my tax rate would have went up. So I'm concerned about that, and I don't want that. But at the same time, we need a new school in Gig Harbor. We need a new school in South Kitsap. We need a new high school. We've needed a new high school since my son was there. How do we get there? I think we get there that everybody has to understand where the dollars are going, what the dollars are being spent on. And I feel like the talks that I'm having at the doors, people say, if there's transparency and I know where those tax dollars are going, I'm going to feel much better about joining in on getting, you know, contributing to this. But when they don't know and there's this unknowing, that's when they're like, no, absolutely not. I don't want it. So that's my concern as somebody who's going to be elected to lead. Well, I need to consider both sides of that, and that's important to me.
How do you think your experience of a parent of a kid who just got through the school system, how is that going to guide you when the legislature is talking about this? I mean, because they get some of the money in there, but they're clearly not done talking about
right.
What to do. Do you think, how is your perspective different?
I don't think it's going to be any different. I've had people ask me that, well, your son's graduated, are you still going to support that? Absolutely. This is a whole generation that's coming next. It's important that we, one, give them quality education, and two, make sure we're funding it so they don't have to worry about leaking roofs or overcrowded or getting to class in 8 minutes, whatever the passing time is at South Kitsap High School. That's important to me, just like any other parent. That's important to me as a person who may be elected by the 26th district constituents. What's important to them is going to be important to me. And I figure that's just shared values.
When you earlier were talking about one of the things that motivated you was what you were hearing kids start to speak about in their experiences. I'm assuming you're talking about some of the gun control things that there were
Absolutely.
rallies this spring.
Absolutely.
Maybe translate that to me. What kids are saying. How do you think you carry that message forward if you're elected? Or are there other messages also? I should ask.
No, I think they're very clear in what they want. They want safety. They want, and what does that look like? And as a parent, I think, and a person who's now running for the legislature, I think that looks like security for our schools. We've got doors that are not secure. Once opened, they're unlocked. How can we lock those? Making sure that all of our schools have whatever type of security measures that we can put in at a cost that everyone agrees with and that everyone is comfortable with.
Is that something that should come from the state? Do you think that's the state,
Absolutely.
do it for everybody, make sure
I
the
do.
schools are
I absolutely
physically safe?
do. Yeah, I do. But I think it's amazing to watch the youth stand up and speak up and say, this is what we need, this is what we want. But they also want to be a part of the conversation of how to get there. Again, there's just that transparency, and I think I think they're stakeholders just as much as anybody else, so, why not listen to them? As a gun sense candidate that the Moms Demand Action gave me, I think the legislature has definitely worked this last session well as far as banning assault rifles, bump stocks. I'd like to see that age go up to 21, but there's some debate about that, and I've heard that from family members. So interesting enough, I'm willing to collaborate with that. Where's the middle ground in that? For me, I'm not sure I would go down to 18. I'm pretty stuck at 21. Just because I think you have to have those decision-making skills, and not sure if you're quite ready for that at 18, although my brother seems to differ with that. So, but I think listening to folks and being willing to go in there and collaborate this coming session is going to be vital to making sure that we take everybody's pros and cons into consideration.
One of the things, just one more along that kind of safety issue, you're talking about physical improvements that you would support. One of the things that always comes up in this conversation is things like counseling services, mental health services.
Absolutely.
From your experience the last couple of years, do you think, are those adequate? Is that something where the legislature needs to get involved?
I would like to see more counselors at our schools. I think the counselors that we currently have, it's not enough. And do we have counselors who are concentrating on the mental health issues of our children? I'm not sure that's being addressed. It's being addressed as much as possible, but not necessarily fully like we could. And I would hope that, the state and the legislature would put some more money into that. I think mental health is interconnected. Health care, mental health, guns, it's all interconnected. So you can't talk about one thing without talking about 3 or 4 other different issues that all are just connected. And so as a parent, I would say, let's see if we can have some more counselors at our schools that are dealing with kids on that level of the issues, mental health issues, as well as all the other stuff that they have to do. But they're overworked already, and there's not that many of them, or not enough of them, and so I'd like to see that change.
You mentioned earlier, I'm going to go back to your own experience. You said the traffic got to be too much.
Oh, yes.
In commuting around, and we've heard this from the other 26th district candidates. You have, that bridge, or if you're coming towards Bremerton, you've got Forest. What are some of the ways that you think, with a growing area in Cape Harbor to Bremerton, a lot of people coming in, how do we address the transportation needs? What's the primary, or what's the top priority to you?
For me, it's the options that you have. Are our transit running at the times where we need transit running? Do we have enough buses? I had a conversation just the other morning, I think it was Monday morning, I had it, the young lady out of Tacoma, who's doing some transportation work out there, and I'm like, I don't understand why Pierce Transit stops at 5:45. I got teenagers that have jobs at the mall that I know, and their parents have to go get them because they don't have their license yet, but they can have a job. How does that work? How can we fix this? How can we? But she's like, we need more dollars. We need more dollars for those extra buses to be able to run, because I just remember my experience. I'm from California, and we had the El Camino. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's called the El Camino. So it's this one street that runs through many towns from San Francisco to, I believe, San Jose. And so there was just these buses that were always there, and you could always go catch that bus. I'm like, we need that. I need the 100 to come. I know it comes every hour through Gig Harbor, but can it come every 40 minutes through Gig Harbor? Can we get buses out on the Key Peninsula for folks who want to age in place? Can we get buses from Port Orchard around to Bremerton quickly? Is there just one bus that goes there? So I think transportation options, increasing those, expanding those. Is there another little ferry that can go between Port Orchard and Bremerton? And not like on this restrictive schedule, but just a schedule that is conducive to high ridership times, and even those times where maybe it's at night and maybe you've got one or two runs where you still have that there for folks that may work those off shifts. That's going to get more people out of their cars, onto the transportation options. Now we're loosening up that traffic. And yes, traffic did get, I think it was 20 minutes, I think I clocked it at 20 minutes more for every year. So the 5th year I worked at Group Health, I switched from the CEO's office to sales. I had to start bringing my car because I was in sales, and I'd have to go where anybody was asking me for information about Medicare and the options they had with Group Health. Okay, I have to take my car into Seattle, and then I would drive back because my territory was Clallam, Jefferson, Kitsap, Pierce, Thurston, South King County. I was all up and down, the highway. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now you don't have to drive all around, but you still have to come to Seattle. Oh my goodness, okay. I started driving and I was like, this is insane. Okay, bus, train. Okay, now you have to leave an hour before to get to the train, because parking for the train, it kept getting less and less because more people are taking the train. From Tacoma. More people are taking the train because they don't want to be in that traffic on the I-5. Oh my, it was, literally. I got to work one day and I just was in tears because I was so stressed for the drive. And my boss just looked at me and she was like, I'm not going to say, you take your minute. It took me 45 minutes just to, okay, now I can work.
There are, the catch is, there are ideas to pay for all this.
Yes.
Are you interested, there are ideas like tolling more roads, there's a trading off gas tax for like a vehicle miles traveled tax. Any of those, are you open to those options? You think those are a good idea to start pursuing?
I'm already told. So I live in Gig Harbor. So if I work in Thurston County, my husband works in Renton, my son played soccer in Puyallup. On any one given day, I could pay $20 just in tolls. Not good. Now you times that by 5, okay, maybe 3, or sometimes 5. I go over once or twice, my husband goes over once, my son goes over once. That's $20 a day in tolls. I'm not sure that's the way to do that. I'd like to make sure that the taxes that are already on the books that we are using the best of our ability before we start adding taxes. I am not about taxing more people, because who you're taxing is the working class and the single mom and the senior who may be having to work a little part-time job and is on a fixed income. I'm not about that. But am I willing to collaborate and listen to something that would be good? Yes, but also coming back to my constituents in the 26th district and making sure that they understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and getting buy-in from them as much as possible, because it's the greater good. Everybody's not always going to agree.
100%.
So,
Do you want to ask a question?
Fully funded schools, that's been the topic for years and years, and now they say it is fully funded because of what they recently did with McCleary, et cetera. What is the formula for fully funding schools?
Wow.
Because they're still
Not fully funded.
They're still doing levies because that wasn't
Yes.
enough.
Yes.
So when is enough,
Enough.
and how is that determined?
I think it's gonna make us go back to the tax structure. We live in a regressive tax structure here in Washington State. I think a progressive tax structure is gonna be the way to change that, so that we'll have more tax dollars towards schools and roads and all the social services that we need. Also think that we need to look at the tax exemptions and the tax loopholes for the top wealthy folks and those corporations who are enjoying those tax exemptions and loopholes, and say, is it producing, is it helping the economy in our district? And if it's not helping the economy in our district, how can we turn that around and increase the economy? Because if you have folks that aren't contributing to the economy, like our working class families, if they're not buying anything or anything, well, our economy is not thriving. We have to change that around. I think the only way we're going to do that is if we take a look at some of those outdated loopholes and exemptions and say, are you producing jobs? Are you producing, putting back into the economy like you're supposed to be? If you're not, everybody pays their fair share.
And one of my all-time concerns is that once something has tax collected on it or budgeted for, it never gets looked at again to see if some of these expenditures are really needed.
I think that is I think you're right, and that's where I think working at Group Health kind of taught me a lot about process improvement and going back and addressing things that you've put in place. Do we need to process improve it? I'm not saying recreate the wheel, just process improve it or make adjustments again so it's working fairly for everyone. Yeah.
I know you're more on Medicaid, but I'm going to ask a health question. Nationally there's an opioid crisis. It's definitely being felt here, definitely part of your district. What should the state's involvement be with the drug problem we have going on in Washington?
I believe that, first of all, if everybody has some sort of health care, does that health care involve addiction prevention? So trying to address the addiction is going to be number one. Again, it's interconnected. Why is there addiction? And a lot of times that addiction stems from something else. So we need to get to the root of the problem for each person. And for me, I believe a lot of times it may be, is it a housing issue? Because it may go back to homelessness. So you're homeless and now you're addicted and you've got nothing. Let's get you into safe, secure housing. Now, what are the social services that you are needing? Addiction prevention help. Let's get you worker retraining, things like that. The state can only do so much, but I also think it can be done with private and public partnerships. Other states, other countries, other towns are doing it. How can we replicate that here? Not just in our district, but in our state to make that work. Just an idea. But if nobody's throwing ideas out, it's like, okay. And if they are, then let's look at those and let's start working on those and quit talking about it.
Yeah, and I mean, that is kind of, I feel like what you see is in Kitsap right now, the triage center is several agencies coming together.
Right.
And saying, here's my piece, here's my piece, here's your piece. And you know, we did that small sales tax to create the center where they all work. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I'm
Right.
wondering.
And Thurston County's doing the same thing. They
Thurston
did the
does it, and
same
Mason did
thing.
it, and
Yeah, it's
each
like,
one of them.
great, this is great. Now we just need to get homes
Yeah.
for these people. What does that look like? Come
And
on,
maybe
let's
that's
do
what
it.
I'm asking is, you see these local efforts, where does the state kind of say, here's our piece, or here's our
Mm-hmm.
role? What about the homelessness part? Could the legislature be more involved on the homelessness side of things? Do you see more of a role there?
I definitely do. I think we could try to funnel some funds there. I think people are trying to map out. Great people are trying to map out these tiny homes that don't cost a lot, with shared water resources. And so, what was I reading? The Suquamish were doing something with the tiny homes, and so they have electricity, but there's a shared shower and bathroom area, and I don't say shared as in each person has their own
Right,
shower.
yeah.
But so I'm like, is that working? How has it worked? Can we do that? Can we replicate that throughout, up and down through our area, down the Kitsap area into Pierce County? Can we replicate that? Pierce County seems to be going through and trying to offer the services to the folks who are homeless, bringing the services to them. Sometimes that needs to happen. I had an interesting conversation with a young lady, not so young, but in Thurston County, who has since passed, and she passed on the street. And I asked her because someone had kind of told me her story. So I was giving her food, and I was like, does anybody know the lady I'm giving food to out there? Oh, she's been on the streets for years. And I had a conversation, I said, don't you want to get a place? And she said she was safer on the street. And I had to, the way she said it to me, you have to honor that and respect that. But I said, have you ever wanted to? She's like, I have, but it's not worked out for me. And she didn't expand, but I had to honor that she didn't want it. And so, we just continue giving her coats and food and whatever. And then the center opened up down there in Olympia. And she was going there, but you wouldn't find her there all the time. You'd still find her by the bus stop that she was always by. And she ended up dying this past winter. And I just thought, man, she spent so many years on the street. How does that, those are the people that we need to get to. Is that therapy? We send somebody out there to talk to her. And for me, I felt like she just wanted to be acknowledged. And people were not acknowledging her. And she always was so appreciative every time I brought her something. Or just came out. I'd go to my car, and I wouldn't go to my car. I'd step over and I'd say, hey, how you doing? You doing all right? You okay? You need anything? And she was just so appreciative that someone acknowledged her. And sometimes it's just about acknowledging them and saying, what do you need? And how can we get that? And you could go down the street to the triage center, and you might be able to get that. And if it's not there, what is it that you need? So I appreciate those folks that have tried to bring these kind of type of services together and pool that. So, but that's just been my experience with.
What capacity were you doing that? Was that just?
I was a community liaison, and I had been in the senior center, and she would never come in the senior center, but she would always be out at the bus stop. So I just started talking to her. Why not? Is this, and then I did ask her, I'm like, so are you on Medicare? Because I can educate you on Medicare. She's like, I don't have a house. Okay, I get it. So, I'm like, where do you get your mail? I don't get mail. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it was just eye-opening for me to say, oh, here's this person who's just like, she is seriously on the street. Okay. So, I just try not to pass judgment. You just do what you can do.
Do you think, I guess what that makes me think of is how individual all of these things are. And to me, that's the biggest challenge, is every one of these people who's on the street is there for a different reason.
Yes.
This example, she
Yes.
just didn't trust the system for whatever experience she had. I understand what you're saying.
I think my other little senior friend knew her story, but it wasn't her story to tell.
Yeah.
So she kind of encouraged me to go talk to her, but she didn't tell me her story. So my
that-
other little senior said she was on the street. She was on the street for several years. She escaped some husband. So, and I don't want to say her name, but I watch her, and now she's in this safe place. She rents a room. She's this thriving, 70-something-year-old woman who is just phenomenal. She started another whole group to support the ladies on the street herself. And I'm like, how are you doing this? And you came off the street,
That is, I couldn't agree with you more. I've noticed that more and more as, you know, it does, it takes some institutional things, but there's all these individual people who, if they weren't just acting that way they do and reaching out, you know, that fills in the cracks.
It does.
I guess the question that I kind of have then, is it better to just say local folks should figure out the solutions the solutions that fit for their community, or should there be a state, here's how we handle this thing?
Oh, I think the local folks are very well equipped to understand what's happening in their communities. You can start there, and that's when you turn to the state and say, here's what we need. Can we get this from the county? Can we get this from the city? Can we get this from the state? Again, there's where we're just pooling our money all together and helping the folks that need to be helped. Yeah.
As you've gone and talked to people and you know, lived there too, what do you think the top priority is in the 26th district? What do you think people care most about getting an answer for, getting a solution for?
Right now on the doors, it's education in both Port Orchard and Gig Harbor. Those are the doors that I've been on. I start Bremerton this coming week. And growth. People are concerned about growth. It's happening very quickly. And because more people are moving here, moving out of the urban metropolitan area because it's less than expensive to live here.
And when you say growth, you mean housing prices?
More people, pricing of housing going up, more people coming to the area, being able to afford to live here.
How do you think we protect that quality of life?
Oh, you know, I like what we're doing in Gig Harbor, where we just said, hold on, we're just going to slow it down a little bit with the developers, and we're going to make sure we're doing this right, and we're going to make sure the infrastructure can support the amount of people that are coming in.
There were at least two, I think. Were there two housing developments that they said, hold on, can't do them?
I believe so. Well, I know there's one that's off Borgen that's just enormous, and there's so many kids in there. And that was one area that I knocked on doors, and the parents were like, wait, ain't another school. We're driving across town to take our kids to school. So, and they were like really like supportive of the bond, and for it not to pass, they were like, what are we gonna do? And I'm like, we're gonna work on this. That's what we're gonna do together. So just making sure that the developers are working with the cities to say, we're going to make sure the infrastructure can handle this many people coming in. I think that's a huge conversation that needs to be had in each town where development and growth is just booming. Absolutely.
Making sure I don't forget anything. I'm doing my best to let the conversation lead, but also
You're fine.
I want to ask similar questions that we've asked the others. Well, you said education. What specifically are people saying?
Overcrowding.
Overcrowding.
Needing more schools.
Physical needs.
Yes. Making sure that we're keeping the schools safe, healthy, because we've got cracks in walls, you know, roofs leaking. The overcrowded, I think, is for most folks, at least in Port Orchard, they were saying that high school is crowded. And while the school district may not think so, or the fire department may not do. I don't know why people were telling me that, but it's like, oh, the fire department doesn't think it's overcrowded, and I was like, really? Because it was overcrowded when my son was there. It was crowded, and I'm like, So,
yeah, we had that run of stories at the beginning of the year when Chris Henry, our reporter, she went to campus a few days in the first day, and the kids were. Every one of them says how crowded they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you called my son, he'd say the same thing. And that was 2004, he graduated. So he'd be like, yeah, it's crazy. So
yeah, it's interesting to see what they'll do next after. I mean, people have said they don't
want to pay for it.
Second school.
So
you gotta do.
So what do we do?
Different plan.
Yeah. And I don't think portables is the way, because portables aren't safe. And our portables connected to the intercom system that the school has in its building, in its brick and mortar building. How do you connect the safety resources to, it's a win if, you know, it's kind of a loose situation. So I mean, it's.
Well, what else? What haven't we asked about? What are the issues you care about?
Those are my top, three. My platform was definitely education, healthcare, and transportation solutions, just because I have my own experience and I felt like that's my wheelhouse where I can be like, okay. I've had a lot of people ask me, well, what committees do you want to be on when you get to the legislature? And I'm like, all the top ones that I'm never going to get on because because everybody wants to be on those committees. And so I'm just hoping I'll be on one. But I think any committee you get on, you're going to have to understand it and learn it and do my best. And I think every piece of legislation affects everyone in the state of Washington, and it may not affect my district wholly and substantially, but it may affect them somehow, and that's going to be important for me. I think it's going to be important for me to make sure that I'm talking to my constituents throughout my time in the legislation. So coming back and saying, hey, I'm going to be at Roundtable, and I'd love to hear from you. What's happening in your neighborhood? What's happening in your community? That's going to be important to me. Continuing to learn all the different issues that are affecting everyone from Bremerton all the way to the Narrows Bridge. That's my goal right now. It's hard though, as you campaign, your time is very limited. So it's like morning times I can make appointments, and then afternoons I'm either doorbelling or I'm on the phone talking to folks. So I think that's going to be important for me to do even after I get elected, because I as a person who lives in the 26th, I never saw my elected officials. So I'm like, did I miss something? What is happening? Where are they? And making sure that I'm listening to everybody. It was interesting yesterday, my husband and I were doorbelling, and we went to a door, and the guy was like, I'm Republican. And I'm like, it's okay. Tell us what's your deal? And he was like, taxes. And I was like, okay. And my husband said, so, well, he's like, well, I'm not really from here. I'm from another state, and here's what I think. And he told us what he think. He's like, thank you. Like, I think he was thanking us for standing at the door to be able to say, we listened, even though you're on a different side of the thinking than we are. It's okay. And I like that. I want to hear from everybody. I want to collaborate with as many people as I can and find that common ground, because really we all want the same thing in the end. It's just how we get there. That's the thing. That's what keeps us apart, I think. And so for me, I'm ready to just get in there and work and do what I have to do.
Any other questions?
You mentioned that you were on the Equity and Diversity Council.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been on one of those groups. I'm not sure what they address.
Okay.
And I know all the way from local up through national and maybe even international, it seems that we're more divided now than we were 10 years ago. And that's very distressing to me, because I grew up in the South. I saw what a lot of the division and the discrimination was, and I just don't want to go back to that ever. So what would you do to lessen that effect instead of having people divide themselves further by bringing out their differences? So would you de-emphasize those differences and emphasize more the things we have in common? What would you do?
Absolutely. I would definitely emphasize the things we have in common, but also we need to promote our cultures that we all come from. There's so many really cool people that have all these diverse backgrounds, and at the school level, I was listening to the kids in one of their little diversity committee meetings, and they were like, we want to, I think they did a piece of paper and everybody wrote what country they were from, and it's like things like that. So to know that you have all these diverse countries in your high school and promote that, how do you promote that? So you have one international night. So we've talked about that at the high school level. We're having an international night where, and I think it's done at the elementary schools already and junior high schools already, but I always think that's that's something that could promote unity. Is it divisive right now? Absolutely. People, you hear every day, it seems like every day for the last week, somebody is calling the police on somebody. And it's just horrific to me. As someone who grew up in this, I'm from San Mateo, California. So I grew up in this, what I call multicultural town. And my mom used to laugh and she's like, I think you have a friend from every nationality. And I want you to know, I think that's really cool, because she was just like, this is what it's about, is to have these different friends from different cultures, and to move here and it not be that way, but to know that there's still lots of cultures out there. How do we bring those folks together and celebrate that difference and celebrate the different cultures that we have? And I think that's what the Equity and Diversity Committee does. On top of, we talk about how we can bring education to the school districts and help teachers understand how to, not necessarily, I'm going to say communicate for lack of a better word, but and incorporate different cultures in the learnings. One friend of mine said to me, I walked into my kids' music class and there all of the musicians and composers on the walls were no one of color. How can we change that? And that's just saying to the teacher, you know, you have Native American, Hispanic, Black composers and musicians, and can we mix that up so that kids can see the difference? That's just one way, I think, of trying to promote that. And if each department or classroom does that, and I'm not saying no teacher does that. There are lots of teachers that do that. There are lots of librarians that do that. But I think if we promoted that more and showed that more, then the kids would be like, oh, okay, we've got a plethora of cultures, even though it doesn't look like that, right here in our own school districts, towns, communities, you know, whatever. So that's important to me, and I want to make sure that we're celebrating all of that.
And I would hope that, and I'm seeing this a lot, not just in schools, but people are just trying to change the history to
Yes.
not see it. I don't think that's right. So I'm hoping that you'll address those things too.
Yeah. No, we see it. It's there. There's nothing we can do about that. But it's. Someone said to me, "Are you going to stand up and speak up when if someone you saw was being ridiculed or, you know, whatever, harassed?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding? Do you know me?" So, yes, I'm going to be that champion for that.